Pum 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 ba da 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 ba 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 bum bum. Ba da 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 da. Up 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 up. I'll stop that now. It's just annoying, isn't it? Welcome to the Justice and Coffee Christmas Podcast Special. I hope you're feeling festive. Can you believe it? It's almost Christmas. It's almost the end of another year. Sorry, I'm going to have to stop those sleigh bells. That is irritating. So in true festive fashion, I'm going to give you a double helping. Yes, that's right. You're getting two for the price of one. Firstly, we've got Esther Hope from Manumit Coffee Roasters coming in to tell us about what they do. I'll give you a clue. Manumit in the Latin means to be released from slavery, to be set free. So they are actually the other anti-human trafficking coffee company in the UK, or rather the original. They got to market way before us. They are our inspiration in many ways at Blue Bear. They're the trailblazers, and we are flying in their jet stream. So Esther's going to tell you all about that. Next to her on the sofa is Charlotte Instone, the CEO and founder of Know the Origin. Charlotte was named earlier this year in the Forbes top 30 under 30 of young entrepreneurial talents, or words to that effect. How impressive is that? Charlotte's going to tell us about how she set up her company, why she set up her company, and what we as consumers need to be conscious of when we're buying our goods. Does that make sense? Would that be good for Christmas? So why not pour yourself a cup of coffee, pop a couple of mince pies in the microwave, warm them up nice and good, settle down on the sofa and listen to the Justice and Coffee Podcast Christmas Special. So, welcome to the Justice and Coffee Podcast, Esther and Charlotte.
Hello, thanks for having us.
It's so good to have you here. It's beginning to look a lot like
Don't
Christmas.
do it. It's not December yet.
So this is our Christmas special. I was thinking, because this, obviously we're recording, what day is it today? 30th of November?
30th, yeah.
So we'll maybe put this next week.
Mm-hmm.
So we're into December, like now, when people are listening to it, if they're listening to it. When we
Woo, Christmas!
Thank you, yeah. So it's not like an August.
I have got a Santa hat on, so I'm feeling the vibes.
You've dressed up for radio.
Yes, dressed up. You can all see my amazing Santa hat.
The idea of the show today, with Christmas just round the corner, is to introduce the world that we are reaching with two examples of brilliant ethical brands. So I want to talk about what you do, who you are, what you represent. But before we get into that, it's morning time.
Yeah.
We've all had long weeks. Mm-hmm. Charlotte, you just said before we started recording, you were up at 4:30 having breakfast this morning.
Yeah.
So it's all about coffee now, isn't it? Like, this is the time of day when you just got to get that fuel into you.
Mm-hmm.
At least two to become a functional human being.
Yes.
So when you say two, do you mean like back to back or like a double shot?
Yeah, like I'm not even sorry about it. I definitely have two before I become a nice person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you go for? Do you do milky coffee or black coffee or?
The strong stuff initially, and then we might add milk when I'm feeling guilty about how many I've drank.
Esther, I imagine the fact that you run a coffee company suggests that you're probably a big consumer.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I just love drinking coffee. Some days I get through and I'm like, do you know what? I just have not drank water today, except water that's been infiltrated with coffee. So in the morning I normally make I have my recipe that I make, and it's normally 800 ml of coffee.
Right. 800 ml of coffee?
Yeah.
Right.
And I will get through that in the first hour.
Wow.
And then that's nearly a litre of coffee.
That's a lot, yeah. So like a can of soft drinks.
Edging on addiction.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like 300 ml, so that's over double. That's over 2 cans of coffee.
Yeah, in the morning.
Wow.
And then more as I go on throughout the day.
Good effort.
And then sometimes, oh my gosh, at the roastery, sometimes we put on a batch brew, which is a few litres, and there'll only be 2 or 3 of us in there. and we'll get through like 2 litres, and then I ask everyone how many cups they've had, and they're like, oh, 1 or 2, and then it's empty, and I realise that I'm the one that has drank the nearly full 2 litres of coffee.
No one came to work today. How did that happen? So, I know about your coffee drinking habits.
Yeah.
Kind of. Today we've got flat white. It's not Manumit coffee. It's not Blue Bear coffee. It's the coffee shop over the road from the studio.
Yeah, it's Dark Arts coffee, actually, which is pretty good stuff.
Is it good stuff? Well, let's not promote them. They're not supporting this, are they?
But no, it's rubbish.
No, it's all good. It's nice. The idea was that we were going to drink our own coffee, but we forgot to bring some sort of utensil that was going to allow that.
I bought some ground coffee with me, but nothing to make it with.
But no means of distributing it. Manumit Coffee, Esther.
Yes.
What is it? Tell me about it, please.
So, we are coffee lovers, obviously, and it all started because there's this charity in Wales called Red Community that works with survivors of trafficking. And so they basically pair up a survivor of trafficking with someone in the local community, and they do a befriending project. So they literally just meet up once a week for coffee or to go swimming or just to help the survivor integrate into local community. And then the people who were befriending were realising that actually when they got their visas and the leave to remain, which takes a few years, these people were going back into jobs and either quitting or being fired within the first week because of mental health problems, and they just couldn't take on full-time work straight away. And then also the other side of it was some of them weren't being able to get jobs at all, because if you've come out of trafficking, you've got a big gap on your CV, or potentially you've never had another job before, and you don't want to put on your CV, I was enslaved for 10 years, or I worked in the sex industry for the past 15 years. So we were like, how do we get them something to put on their CV? Yeah. And so we combined our love for coffee with our idea of creating employment, and decided, at first we thought maybe we should set up a coffee shop, and so we looked into that, but then someone said to us, well, actually that's not a very safe space for people who have been enslaved. And also, if you've ever worked in a coffee shop and you know you've got Karen who comes in and she wants like a half shot soya milk with extra hot like vanilla syrup and whipped cream that's not soya milk.
And now I want it now.
Yeah, she wants it immediately, and your survivor starts having a panic attack and just doesn't know what to do. And then Karen's going to ask for the manager, because she always does, and it's just not a safe space for them to be able to calm down during that panic attack. Yeah. Whereas in the roastery, we've got like our location, which is really like secret. It's like MI5 style. No one knows where we are. Our address isn't online or anything, and we don't have signs outside. They can come to work and know that they're not going to be bothered. No one's going to know where they are or come looking for them, because some of them do still have like the police cases ongoing, so they've got their traffickers looking for them.
Oh wow.
And so having that space where they can come to work and feel safe and start to build up their confidence is really important.
Yeah, what an amazing initiative. I first came to hear about Manumit when I got back from a bit of time in the Dominican Republic working for an anti-human trafficking charity, and I had this idea of a coffee company. Let's use coffee. Coffee is a perfect vehicle if we're going to build a business that's going to raise awareness and raise capital to invest in effective charities working to combat human trafficking. Why wouldn't you use coffee? So I did my Google search. I thought, I wonder how many coffee companies are doing this. And I found one. And that
literally
was you guys. So, I jumped on a bus, a National Express, and to reduce my carbon footprint, because I'm extremely conscientious, and made my way to Cardiff and met you and Di and the team, and I just thought, wow, these guys are absolutely flipping brilliant. So it's absolutely a pleasure of mine to bring you onto the podcast. I was so keen of just to give you an opportunity to tell your story, and
Thank you.
I think it's brilliant. So I don't see you as a competitor, as the only other anti-slavery coffee company in the UK. I think you're brilliant, and coffee's great too.
Thank you very much.
What are you doing at the moment, Coffee? You've got a couple of blends or varieties, haven't you?
So we've got quite a lot going on, really. We work really hard to make sure that our supply chain is really traceable and transparent as well. There's no point us helping survivors of slavery in Wales if the people that are picking the cherries aren't being paid properly. Like, it would just be a joke. So
Agreed.
We've worked really hard to make sure that we import our coffee well. And so a lot of our coffee comes from Zukukabora in Uganda, which is an organisation trying to help people lift themselves out of poverty through growing coffee. So it's actually a bit of a crisis going on at the moment with the coffee market, where the cost of coffee on the commodity trade market is 0.9. Why am I talking like that? Is 90 cents per pound.
Right.
But
It's extremely cheap.
The cost of production is $1.80. So
they're selling at a loss.
So yeah, they're losing half of the money they're investing and paying for us to be able to have coffee at a cheap price, which is just absolutely outrageous. Why would we ever expect a business to run like that? So in Uganda, people were literally digging up their coffee trees and just throwing them away because they're thinking, what is the point in us even growing this anymore? It's like eating our money.
Yeah.
So they were like, we can just grow something that we can eat instead, like plantain or bananas or avocados, which are very cheap in Uganda, by the way, and delicious. So then this company stepped in and was like, or they are a charity actually, they stepped in and said, if we can help regulate the cost of the coffee that these farmers are being paid, maybe we can encourage them to grow it and make sure that they're making money out of it and that it's sustainable and that people are paid properly. So that's what they did. And my business partner, Nick, has actually been out there for about 3 months now, helping them with their business plan.
3 months in duration, start to finish?
Yeah, he's
time.
still there. He left in October and he's coming back in December and then going back next in January to help them out again, helping them with the business plan and like growth so that they can expand and help more people. Because the thing is, we can help like 5 or 6 survivors at the moment in our space, but at the origin of the coffee, they're helping thousands of people in that community to just grow sustainably and improve livelihoods and educate children, and anti-trafficking projects are going on in that community and things like that. So Nick, my business partner, is really passionate in helping them grow their business and help more people in that way. So that's really, really cool.
That is extremely cool.
So you can find all of our Ugandan coffee on the website. We've got like a washed coffee, a honey coffee, and a natural coffee, which is the different processes. So it kind of gives them a different flavour profile to your classic ones. So if you're feeling a bit adventurous, or you have that coffee lover in your life who wants something a bit different, then definitely check those out. And
what an amazing Christmas present they would make, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny, you said just before we started recording about going on an event, an anti-trafficking event, and bringing your brand to it, bringing your coffee to it, and even having a sales stand.
Yeah.
Well, I'm telling your story.
Yeah, no tell.
I'm just trying to protect the brand of the charity. But someone also on that demonstration, that walk.
Yeah.
So, that looks great, but it's a bit expensive for me. And it's kind of like, well, actually, no. The reason it costs that is because we're paying the right price for it. And we've got to educate people, haven't we, that getting things cheap isn't always a great idea.
Exactly. Cheap. Well, I always say when things are cheap, someone else is paying the cost.
Yeah.
Like, for example, with the coffee market price, it's like, yeah, you can get coffee that cheap, but the farmer is literally paying the cost of production on our behalf, which is outrageous. You would never expect a business to work like that here. And we, like, coffee farmers it is a business, isn't it? And you want them not only to cover the cost of production, but the cost of living is important. But even more than that, for a business to be sustainable, it has to make profit. Like, you wouldn't expect a business in the UK to run just turning over, for the first couple of years, but the goal is to make profit and grow the business. And so why are we expecting coffee farmers to just about survive when they should be having the business to make money and build a life for themselves and have that profit?
Well, it's exactly in those circumstances when the coffee market's in a place, or when there's a commodity that costs more money to produce than to sell. Those are the circumstances that incubate human trafficking.
Exactly.
And if I can't afford to pay my staff, then I have to enslave them.
Yeah.
So we need to be conscious of that. So thanks for bringing that to our attention. Charlotte, know the origin. Charlotte Instone, Forbes 30 under 30,
Literally.
entrepreneur, superstar, next winner of The Apprentice whenever.
I won't be going on The Apprentice ever. Bit too much egos on there.
Can I just say, Charlotte is absolute goals though. In terms of me, she is my hero. I see Charlotte as businesswoman goals.
Yeah.
Gonna cry.
Yeah, incredibly impressive, slightly intimidating. I sat down with Charlotte once. We went both speaking at an event. Excuse me, I'm getting through my porridge. And we went for lunch, didn't we, Charlotte, after this event, and she sort of made a lot of very kind but observational suggestions of what I should be doing with my business to improve it. I sort of came away like, I'm useless.
I really, that was the opposite of what I wanted to happen. I was literally like, this is phenomenal. I just get really excited by ideas, and then I just verbally vomit all of that, and then somebody's like, wow, that was a lot.
So many things I'm not doing.
Yeah.
Tell me about Know the Origin. Actually, tell me the origin of Know the Origin.
Oh,
where did it start?
Great question.
Do you want a mince pie, by the way? I'm sort of hoarding them over here. I couldn't.
Didn't notice that.
I like them hot. They're better hot, aren't they? But I couldn't find a means of.
This is so festive. Oh my gosh, my mum would be so proud.
I'll have a clean up afterwards. Don't worry about the mess. Yeah, tell me about how it all started, Charlotte.
So Know the Origin started, I keep telling people a couple of years ago, and time's just going really fast. It's actually 4 years ago.
Okay.
Which is slightly terrifying, getting old, aging.
Another subject.
Yeah, another subject that we'll talk about later. So I had that idea for Know the Origin when I was at university. I was studying fashion buying and merchandising at London College of Fashion. So it's basically the degree where you become a very niche job afterwards, you become a fashion buyer. I went with the intention of coming out and getting a job at Macy's or Bloomingdale's, living in a big city,
you wanted to
making
live
product
in the US.
Yeah, and basically, while I was at university, I befriended this girl who was a raging vegan, and she was really passionate about all the things that I was, social justice, but for her it translated into food and where things had come from. And I'd heard of the term sweatshop in fashion, but hadn't really actually thought about how it links to our job. We were trained at university on how to push down prices and how to negotiate with suppliers and factories, but never actually really taught to think about the people that we were impacting in those decision making. And while I was at university, she basically gave me this book that was Safi Amini's book called Naked Fashion, and I read the whole thing in a day, which has never happened to me before because I pick up books and then I just have 20 on the go and never finish any of them. And I finished this book and I just thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And realised I just spent 54 grand on a degree in a really niche area that I didn't want to do, which is every parent's absolute dream. So I started getting really interested in ethical fashion. At university, I was the really annoying one that every lecturer would ask questions and then either get asked to leave or
come on, we could have finished by now.
Yeah, literally. And I remember we had a talk where there was it was head of buying from a large ethical kind of retailer. They're like doing more than a lot of people are. And I remember somebody asked the question, oh, what happens if you place an order and you can't, and that those items aren't selling? Like, what do you do? And she was like, oh, you can cancel the order or move suppliers, like all this stuff. And I was like, well, what about that community? What about those people? And I just kept asking these questions, and she got more and more uncomfortable. And I was like asked to leave the lecture, basically.
Oh my word.
And like, I remember just being sat outside and just, I'm like a goody two shoes. I've never received attention in my life. So this was, I was like, oh no, like, what am I doing?
Did you cry?
I did actually. And I'm not even embarrassed about it.
Sounded like a crying story.
But yeah, the more I kind of looked into ethical fashion, once you know a little bit, it's like a dark hole. There's just so much there that you don't even realise. And so I became a bit obsessive with this issue, and I started an ethical fashion show in London. So out of my university room, because it was kind of ridiculous. We only had like 10 hours of lectures a week. So then all this other time I just basically spent on like doing this fundraiser. So I worked on a project in Tanzania working with women that had basically either been trafficked or were like vulnerable in their community, and it was like a textiles project, and we raised enough to basically work with local partners in Tanzania to build this workshop so like all the women in the community could like come together. And I think that was when I really realised like how much you can do with like the influence and the privilege that you have. And I just really didn't want to work as a fashion buyer. I was like pretty sure that I wanted to do anything but that. So I started looking for ethical brands that I could work for, and just realised that they were all just really expensive, really gross, like itchy looking, or like just not very fashiony. And I had worked in my first year of uni at ASOS and various different fashion brands, and I just love that. Like, I love creativity, I love fashion, and don't believe that just because you're doing it properly and paying people, you should compromise on those things. So I just looked at starting my own brand. I went out for my dissertation to Bangladesh and looked at if the whole fashion industry wanted to go ethical, could it? And what are the like benchmarks that would basically stop it? Because at the moment, like 0.4% of the clothing that we buy in the UK high street is ethical.
Whoa, right, let's get that statistic again. 0.4% of the clothing we buy in the UK high street is
in
ethically
the UK,
sourced.
yeah, exactly.
That is
so I just
appalling,
looked at actually if the whole industry wanted to go ethical, could it? And what are the things that are stopping it? So I visited over like 150 different producer groups, so from cotton farmers to ginners, spinners, knitters, dyers, and just really understood like the depth of fashion supply chains and the kind of this whole model of like outsourcing and how many literally hundreds of people are involved in like the making of one t-shirt, and just really began to question how we're making it for so cheap. I spent quite a lot of time while I was in Bangladesh. There was basically a factory that collapsed called Rana Plaza.
What was that, 2013?
Yeah, in Savar, and basically like over 1,100 people died in this factory collapse, and over 2,500 people were trapped in the rubble. And during this time, like sitting with the women that had been affected by that, and like them telling me their story of how they'd had to wait for compensation and like hadn't received anything, and as a result had to choose which child to traffic.
Oh my word.
Because they had no money. Like, they were blacklisted from working in any other garment factory because they had post-traumatic stress, because after being trapped in the rubble for a few days, like, you would have that, like, and it, just really realising like every single thing that we do has a huge consequence, and whether we see it or we don't, like, it does. So I started looking at people that were doing things really differently, so like a lot of fair trade and organic cooperatives. So I started building that supply chain in India because we could get like super traceable fabrics. I raised a little bit of money initially to start.
Just during
with
your studies or after your studies?
So this is like during,
Wow.
and the first year after. I moved in after university. I moved out of London, moved back in with my parents. Again, every parent's dream, every graduate's
we've probably
dream.
all done that at some
That
point.
is like the business owners. Like,
Yeah.
I've had to move back in with my parents as well to save money in running the business.
Yeah. And I remember I just camped out in this like little side bedroom that was like, you know, the box room of the house, just writing this business plan, and just showed it to every single person that I knew and became like obsessive with it. And it was brutal feedback from every single person. And I remember just being like, should I even do this? And
Brutal in what sense? This is not realistic, this is impossible.
Yeah, like no one's done this, like why are you trying to do it?
Right.
Like why don't you just start with like one part of the business being ethical and then like grow like and add bits in. And for me, I just really feel like the more compromise or like grey space that you leave in a business, like the more it can be like filtered down. And I just really wanted to build a brand that was really different. So initially the brand started off with the name Coalesce, which was basically about bringing people back together. No one could spell it. I couldn't say it. I definitely couldn't spell it. So we then kind of we realised a few months in that the focus was more around like transparency, and that was like the real core of the business. So then I came up with a spreadsheet of like over 100 names, and Know the Origin was the one that won.
Yeah. What do you mean
Nice.
won? You put that out for public opinion, did you, amongst your friends and your network?
Everyone received
Score.
a Google form doc.
Oh, right. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I think that's a good conclusion. I like Know the
Yeah,
Origin.
I think it's really good.
KTO.
Yeah.
And you do your own, so you have your own branded merchandise, don't you? But you also supply other goods that meet your standard in terms of their
Yeah, so
traceability.
for the first like year and a half, I started with a really amazing business partner called Laura. So we designed the product and made it, and then she left the business. I think it was like a year in, and then I carried on, and I think this was maybe like 2 years into it. We wanted to do a pop-up shop and basically couldn't afford the shop, so I was like trying to think of creative ways to get this pop-up shop going, and we found a space and basically offered loads of other ethical brands to come into the space, and they paid like a commission and or rent, and as a result it meant that the shop was like a lot more people there, like
Yeah.
it was a lot more collaboration.
Nice move.
And loads of customers, like a ridiculous amount, were like, where can I buy all this stuff? And I was like, oh, you can't. It's just here for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I was like, why can't you? And I was kind of thinking a lot about like, because there are other ethical platforms out there, but they're quite tailored to a very specific customer. And a lot of them aren't focused on like affordability or accessibility. They're often like multi-brand platforms that target like yummy mummies. And the product on there is £200 or £300.
Oosh.
So I think I wanted to just bring together like this new wave of brands that are super accessible, really nice, and don't look gross. So yeah, I started building that. So we still sell our own label, KTO, which is Fair Trade and Organic Fashion, but that sells on the wider platform of Know the Origin. So at the moment, I think we have about 120 brands on there, and then we've just raised our seed round. So the plan is like from January, that should hopefully next year grow to about 1,000 brands. So
Wow.
Wow. You're gonna sell merchandise from 1,000 brands.
yeah,
Via the
that's
website?
plan. Yeah.
Wow. So in terms of logistics, is that going to be your challenge, or is it sort of you're a portal, or how's that? What's the model for that?
So basically, we have looked at a few different models. We looked at originally a lot of platforms do it via the dropshipping platform. So when you order, the brands will like directly fulfill that. So if you order from a few brands, you'll receive 3 or 4 different packages.
Yeah.
I think for me, for ethical to actually become mainstream, it needs to be as good and then the ethical is like an added extra. So I think in order for that to happen, you need to have next day delivery. It needs to be like quick, all together. You don't pay taxes on the product. A lot of the ethical brands we sell are international. So if you order, say, from one of our companies that we sell, like Hara the label, they're like bamboo underwear made in Australia. You'll often pay like £28 for the bra, and then you'll pay the same again in import tax.
Oh, wow.
So by us holding all of the stock, we basically mean you can get it next day delivery. You don't have to pay any import taxes.
Gotcha.
And so we hold all of the stock.
Wow.
And my dad at the moment packs all of the orders. And
Go on, Dad.
He is amazing, like one of the most servant-hearted, like gentle, patient guys. So we're building like a little warehouse in Manchester.
Yeah.
So we'll hold it there, and then I don't know what will happen. Like maybe it'll get to a size where we kind of use another company to like do all of that. But right now it's going to be Mark.
It's in-house.
And Co.
Yeah.
Love
that's
it.
cool. Go on, Dad.
Yeah, he's amazing.
So are you technically your dad's boss?
Uh,
Yes, you are.
Yeah, we partner on stuff.
Diplomatic answer.
Yeah.
I was in Bangladesh last week. What do you think? What's your opinion on how far we've changed in the last sort of 6 years since the Rana Plaza factory collapsed? Do you think there's signs of progress, or have we not made nearly enough progress? What's your thinking?
I'm overly optimistic, so I think there are signs of progress in terms of like consumer awareness. I think there's more of that than there ever has been before. I think a lot of the like legislation and work that was done after Rana Plaza has been kind of undone now. Like it's gone back a little bit.
Oh, really?
I think there's been acts like the Modern Slavery Act, which has been amazing, first step in like putting like a foot in the ground and saying like this is an issue that businesses need to look at. But again, there's not really any accountability around there. Like a lot of companies can just use like a standard template, and they can actually just put in a Modern Slavery Act like, hey, actually we don't do anything. Like, and that's enough.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that bizarre?
yeah. So I think that there is, as with anything, a long way to go, and I think especially the issues that we're facing with like climate change, especially in a lot of the communities that I visited in Bangladesh, are actually going to be underwater in the next 10 years.
Wow.
So there's people building amazing social charities and all these kind of projects that help train people, but actually they're going to be refugees, and actually we need to address like the initial issue, like the environment that underpins every single social issue.
No
so-
point rearranging furniture on the Titanic, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I think there is a lot of work to do, but that's why I just think you can't build a social company without looking at the environmental issues. Like it's all so tied together. So yeah.
Do you think, in terms of like fast fashion, I watched a documentary on Netflix. Did you?
The true cost.
The true cost.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. Do you think we're becoming more sort of socially aware, more conscientious in the way we are consumers? We've got to be, haven't we? Slowly.
Well, I think everything's growing, so that pool of people is definitely growing, but I think alongside that you've got cheaper, faster, bigger organisations growing as well. So I think I've noticed in the last year or so just over 1,000 ethical and social businesses start. Which is really exciting, and I think once that demand gets there and people actually have like available and convenient choices, then they will shop those. Because I mean, if you have 2 t-shirts that are like an option, they're similar prices, and one's been made in a way that people haven't been killed in the process,
pick that.
most people wouldn't like not pick that. So I think convenience is a big part of that, but then on the other hand, I guess like Boohoo, Primark, like all these fast fashion retailers like Pretty Little Thing are claiming their biggest years yet in sales. So I do think the younger generation, there's this gap between like values and action, where at the moment we're all talking about it and we all sense that it's something that we want, like sustainability, like it's cool to be kind type vibe, like that's definitely getting bigger, but then it's a lot easier, isn't it, to not have to shop your values. So I think also the ethical community is in quite a little bubble.
Yeah.
Everyone knows everyone does everything together, like and I think all my friends are kind of running ethical stuff or like doing, so I think I'm like, everyone cares, this is really cool. And then I like chat to other people, I'm like, oh, you didn't even know that like cotton was a plant out of the ground. There's an education side of it that needs to happen first. So I think that's why with like Know the Origin, we're really building, like, in order to go outside of like the ethical sphere of customers, like we're really building a lot into our business model where we do education stuff. So we're looking at like creating basically like almost like a dinner party model of like plastic free shops where we can like give people education and resources that they can share and talk to people about the issues of fashion. We're looking at doing a lot more talks, podcasts, like all that kind of thing, just to like share with people.
If you ever need guests for your podcast, I know a couple of great ones.
Amazing.
Talking about doing podcasts, I don't know about you, but it's absolutely freezing in here, isn't it?
It is cold,
It's Christmas.
I don't. Yeah,
Living
maybe
in the fake snow.
Maybe it's, yeah, please, mate. The producers who's listening in the sound engineer obviously was listening because he's now just run out to turn up the air conditioning. It wasn't intentional. It's not thematic for our Christmas episode, but I'm beginning to look like it
shiver violently.
Get the hot chocolate.
Hairs on my arm are all standing up. Charlotte, what's your favourite Christmas film?
Love Actually.
Oh, good answer.
I'm not gonna lie, like I started playing Mariah Carey last week. I started playing the first like 2 seconds of the song and then I was like, oh, this feels wrong, and like, oh, I'm not ready for this. So I started with Love Actually, and we put our Christmas tree up because at the moment I've just moved to London for the month for this pop-up that we're doing.
Welcome.
And so I bought a Christmas tree because I just like, we have this thing the last few years where we've done pop-ups over December, then you come out of the pop-up and it's Christmas Eve and you've like missed all of the festive vibes. So I was like, no, this year we're going to do it differently, like we're going to enjoy Christmas. So watch Love Actually, and like nothing, I cry every time. I think I've seen that film maybe like 15-20 times and I'm still like, oh,
what bit
great.
do you cry at?
Just all of it, the whole way through. I don't know. Do you know what? It's a bit where they all hug at the airport, and I just think, oh, humanity's great.
Yeah.
It's so nice when everyone's happy and smiley and like loving towards each other.
Yeah, nice. I mean, you got to dwell on those sort of things at Christmas, right?
Yeah, definitely.
What about you, Hopi?
My favourite Christmas film, without a doubt, is Elf.
Oh, nice.
I actually love that film.
Elves scare me so much.
It scared you?
Yeah, I couldn't watch it all. I had to switch it off.
What did you think?
Just like the hats. I just really like, they really freak me out. I don't know why.
The pointy hats?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I love Elf. I think it's so funny. It's like, it's just so ridiculous. And I feel like a lot of my character is quite similar to Alf.
When you said that, I was like, that makes sense.
I would absolutely love to spend a day just being him. You know when he's like jumping across the road on the zebra crossing, like hopping across? That's so me. Like, I would love to do that. And like going in the revolving doors and just running round and round and round. I think a day in the life of Alf, just to be like completely carefree like that. Oh my gosh, that would be the dream. Watch out, London.
Cool.
What's yours?
Oh gosh.
Please say The Holiday.
I kind of do like The Holiday. Yeah.
I feel like
That's
top
a good
three. That
rom-com.
always.
Would it be wrong to say that it's not perhaps the manliest choice of Christmas films, if I could engender it in some way?
But why does it need to be? And what does that even mean?
It's very like, it's completely unreal.
Yeah.
In every
Also, my
possible
parents
way.
just visited like where it was filmed.
Yeah.
And my dad said that the little cottage in it, they just built it for the film, and then it was knocked down.
Yeah.
And then there's a little plaque where it was. But
That's so sad. I would have moved in there.
Was it? Yeah, same. And I was like, it's actually
Dream
really far
cottage.
away. You don't want to live there.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I kind of feel like Die Hard I'm obviously being bang out of order
I think
here.
you
People
have
are gonna
this
be
like absolute outrageous idea of like what masculinity is.
outrageous. But
Well,
I do.
it is like there's nothing more manly than like being emotional and being
Yes.
vulnerable and like no like
And being okay and secure in that.
yeah,
I'm outnumbered here.
you are rightfully so.
So your favourite Christmas
like
movie
Die Hard,
is The
though.
Holiday, we've decided,
yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with
And I
that.
sob all the way through it.
Great.
Can I get back to this issue of affordability
Yeah.
for both of us, for all of us? Is it too much to ask people when they look at the price of, even if you make a real concerted effort to make it competitive, is it fair to expect them to pay that extra potentially, 20-25% on like the cheaper brands or sometimes a bit more? What do you think, both of you?
100%, yes. I think that we have, like, as a society, I think Charlotte touched on this before, it's like we've really, I think it's called like fetishism, where it's like you completely distance yourself from the people involved in making your product. And so
Was that fetishism?
I studied it at uni, I think that's what it's called.
Okay,
We all laughed at.
I trust you.
But yeah, where I've lost my train of thought now.
I shouldn't have interjected. I apologise. What we should take some sort of responsibility to pay a bit more. Is that
because
fair?
because we need to remember that there is people involved in the products that we're making, and that I mean, all of us are running business. We're not ballers. Like, I don't take home a big paycheck at the end of the day. Like, most of the
Charlotte did
extra
turn up here in a Rolls
expense-
Royce though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I did not.
She texted us in advance to say, hey,
I
by the way,
walked down the road
I'm arriving soon, so we'd be outside to open
Yeah,
the
to
door.
welcome red carpet.
I was speaking to my dad yesterday, and he made a sort of fairly classic comment. Was, at the end of the day, it's just money, and that's quite a typical thing, and I can get the sentiment of it. But is that not just a comment only made by people who have money?
Yeah.
Only made by people who aren't going to sleep rough and
Yeah.
don't know the agonising pain of an empty belly. And I think, where is the connection between, like you said, Charlotte, how do we make this the new normal?
Yeah.
I was looking, I think I was looking at your website at a couple of tops or shirts or something, like a nice Oxford blue shirt or something. It was like 60 quid or something. I thought, well, I could probably get that somewhere else for 30 quid. But that's the problem, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like, well, actually, once upon a time, before the fast fashion sort of generation had its impact where we are now, really. Once upon a time, you didn't buy a shirt 3 times a month. Or, you didn't go in and
Yeah.
come out with bags full of clothes that would get worn once, maybe.
Yeah.
And then sit there on the shelf for like a year or two and never get touched again. You'd have your shirt. You'd have your Sunday best. You'd
Yeah.
have clothes for occasions. So it would cost that.
Yeah. That's what's hard, is like you can't almost go back from that. Like, once you've had something, it's very
Yeah.
hard to then have something that feels lesser than that. Like, having the option to get something new all the time, like, feeds this insatiable
Yeah.
need for like consuming, and I think it's going to be very difficult to do that. Like, we have a lot of kind of die-hard ethical followers or customers that are like, oh, well, you're still selling stuff. And I'm like, I know we are selling stuff, but it's made properly and it's growing
Yeah.
sustainable supply chains. And it does cost more to do that. And I think it's really difficult, because I think at the moment it's almost being put a lot, like the majority of the pressure is being put on the consumer to like make the effort to find sustainable brands and invest in them and make the compromise of paying more. Whereas actually, the businesses that are operating under mass scale, turning over billions a year, there should
Yeah.
be more of an equal pressure on them to like change and transform their supply chains.
Yeah.
I think that's why, I guess, with like our business model, like we try and invest like proceeds and profits from products into supporting like independent trade unions. So something that I feel really passionate about is actually when people are told about their rights and know that they don't have to work 7 days a week in a factory earning pennies an hour, that actually they can unionize and transform like something that is really broken into something that is amazing. So I guess it needs to come from all angles. It needs to come from the brand, from the consumer. yeah, I'm from the people.
Was it?
That was a stomach rumble.
That wasn't a stomach rumble.
That was.
Incredibly sensitive microphones.
You're all going to hear that. Enjoy.
I think it was promising, and I like to always seize upon the hope things. If not, it just can be quite gloomy.
Yeah.
But there was a big move in the Financial Times and the newspaper this year about profit with purpose. Lionel Barber, I think the chief editor of the Financial Times, sort of wrote a big piece on the fact that actually we got to start calling businesses out. Making profit isn't something let's not demonise people being profitable.
Yeah.
No.
But let's just make profit with purpose. What is the purpose beyond just paying huge salaries? Let's try and build a pressure on big business. Maybe even our tiny little enterprises, in the grand scheme of things, when compared to the big companies, we can at least provide a great example. And I think, like you said, the great news about all the different ethical businesses that are opening their doors, it should influence big business, shouldn't it? So, well, actually, what are you doing? This is what we're doing.
I think it definitely does. Like, I think we run a lot of events and panels on like sustainability, and we get a lot of people from directors or head of buying and buying teams of like high street retailers who are saying it is small brands that put this on the map so that we can never go back to a conversation where we don't talk about this. All of the high street retailers know that ethics and sustainability is coming, and the more brands that make it kind of available will mean that it has to be it'll have to be a given at some point in the high street. So I think at the moment there's a lot of I think some brands have designed their supply chain deliberately in a way where they're building factories outside refugee camps because they're going to where people are most vulnerable to get the lowest price possible.
Oh, wow.
But I think the majority of brands, like when you talk to people that operate within those brands, the system is so complicated, and they're just doing one tiny section that they almost don't look up to realise that all those 100 jobs have resulted in this person being pressured or not being paid. And like, it's almost, people are starting to question things a lot within businesses. And I think often we have to be really careful about how we talk about sustainability, because it can be quite negative towards brands on the high street, especially. And I think often within those brands, there are hundreds of people that want to do things differently and are pushing and campaigning for that. And I think it's a really good thing. We often get asked about things like H&M conscious, and do we think, it's a good thing that they have like an ethical line, and I'm like, but they're bringing it to the masses in a way that small brands can't. And I know that they're always watching small ethical brands and are inspired by what we do and what we're pushing, and we're helping them to push forwards with the standards that we create. So I definitely think all good work is good. I think there needs to be more that's done, but it's a slow process, isn't it, to undo an industry that's been built over hundreds of years. Yeah.
We had Justine Carell on the podcast towards the start, and she's a director of one of the directors at Unseen, which is an anti-human trafficking project. So you're part of the country, isn't it? It's sort of Bristol based, wasn't far away from you. And she talks about working with businesses and sort of taking the Modern Day Slavery Act. And one of the requirements is, like you mentioned earlier, to have a statement on your website that says, what are you doing about slavery in your supply chain? And you can actually say, I'm doing nothing, and you comply with this piece of legislation. But the idea is you're going to start to engage with this issue and try and to look into where you get your products from. But she very fairly says, we don't like to do name and shame and point out the bad guys and point a stinky finger at them and say, look at these guys, these are the baddies. We like to do name and fame. So we work with businesses, and when they're just really exhibiting a sign of, a positive effort to make change, go, hey, look at these guys, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you agree? And do you think there are businesses in fashion and in coffee that are doing the same, that we can, like, I think of Starbucks or Costa or the big ones. Are they doing enough? Should we go easy on them or what?
I think it's like no one's behaviour ever changes by being told they're doing a crap job. So I think it does require like positivity and like supporting and encouraging where you see good work. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, and at a speed that I don't think we quite understand yet. I think there's a lot of incredible brands out there that are really pushing forwards. Like, I love brands like Patagonia. Amazing books on, like, really just giving brands resources and, like, people resources on how to do it, like sharing information. I think that's really amazing.
Any good books to recommend, or?
So he does, like, he wrote like a pack of 3 books.
Who's this?
The guy who started Patagonia.
All right. Whose name have you forgotten?
His name is Yvonne Chenard.
No idea.
I have it in my bag. If you Google it, one of his books is Let My People Go Surfing. And it's all about building a culture within your company that basically doesn't control people, but lets them do what they want to do. And it's a really interesting book. And yeah, he's written kind of another that's like a toolkit on how to start an ethical business. So, like, all the things you need to think of, like, environmentally. So that's pretty cool.
In terms of coffee, I think one thing that's been really interesting for me is, like, recently McDonald's put out an advert that was like, we could pour pretty patterns in our coffee and charge more for it, but we don't. And there was this huge kind of backlash against McDonald's, like, and they created these posters, like, on Instagram and stuff saying, like, you could pay your farmers properly, but you don't. And I actually thought that was really unfair, because I've done a lot of research into McDonald's, and that, like, they're actually really, really good at supporting farmers, and, like, they've got loads of sustainability reports that you can read, and, like, obviously you can, like, sustainably wash something and make it sound good when you're actually not doing much. But in terms of, like, big retailers for coffee, I have to say McDonald's actually is doing really, really well in terms of, like, buying coffee, like, sustainably and making sure that people are paid properly and things like that. So in terms of ethical coffee on the high street, I hate to say it, but McDonald's is probably one of the better ones.
Yeah, that's a surprise.
And the advert should have really said the reason that the coffee is so cheap is because it's on a sheer volume scale that we would never be able to compete with.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Like, for us small brands, we have overheads to pay. We have, like, so much. Like, when I buy coffee from a coffee farmer, I can only buy, like, a few sacks at a time, like maybe 30 sacks to 50 sacks from a coffee farmer. But the McDonald's buys, like, tons and tons and tons and tons and tons, and then they throw it in a roaster that roasts tons at a time. And so their overheads is so significantly less, just in terms of the bills they've got to pay, the amount they can do at once, compared to me, who's, like, a small roaster in Wales. We've got to pay the rent on our unit, and we've got to pay, like, for literally bottles of gas out the back, and pay for hourly, like, we can roast maybe, like, 30 kilos an hour, whereas McDonald's roasts tons in a minute. Like, so just thinking about the scale of things for their coffee, the reason that it's cheaper is not necessarily that they're exploiting people, but it's just sheer volume difference.
So what if I'm not massively queued up on it, and I want to buy myself a bag of coffee, or I operate a business, or my job in the office is buying the office coffee, and we want to be ethical, we want to be aware of these issues and engaging with these issues. So what should I look out for? Now, there are things like the Fair Trade certification or Rainforest Alliance, but there are also issues with those certifications because they come at a cost. But what are the things? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm thinking about maybe a quick description of the difference between blends and single origin, and what are the sort of things that might help somebody buy a coffee, like basics that might give them more of a clue that it's an ethically sourced coffee than just like consumer coffee bought in a warehouse, someone on the ton.
Sorry, I had something stuck in my throat. Lovely. I think some things to look out for is, like, for example, I've got our packaging here, which is our little Christmas special.
Nice. And
But,
you brought one for me and Charlotte.
Yeah, so I bought one. I didn't know whether you wanted whole bean or
Christmas
ground.
special. Yay!
So that's whole bean.
Perfect.
But so this one, for example, it's got on it like I've put the importer on there, Cal's Coffee, so you can.
I know Cal.
He's such a legend.
Brazil.
Shout out to Cal from Brazil.
Lovely
He's
guy.
such a babe. If he's listening, we love you. But he basically imports the coffee. It's this farm, Fazenda Bom Jesus, which is a great name, by the way. But it's actually his auntie's coffee farm. So it's like family coffee that he's importing into the UK.
Fazenda means farm in Brazilian. doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think Bom is good. So it's like the
Good
farm of
Jesus
good
farm.
Jesus.
I like that.
So classic Christmas one.
Yeah.
Jesus' birthday. Let's
Amen.
buy us coffee. So
Chocolate, spices, and tangerine.
yeah, very Christmassy.
Yeah,
Christmas
yeah.
vibes.
Perfect.
But so when you're buying a coffee, if you can see where the farm has
Yes.
come from,
Good point.
that's really important. And asking about not just asking where does the coffee come from? Oh, Brazil.
Yeah.
But like the roaster should know the farm that it's coming from and have some information. Even if they get that from the general importer, it's like if it's traceable, you should at least be able to say what part of Brazil it comes from or what farm and have some information about that. And then I guess the rest of it's just like down to taste or what you would like dark roast or ground
I think
whole bean.
certifications are a really good part of being able to quickly tell if a product is sustainable, in the sense that at least that business has had some kind of third party audit, some kind of accountability in their supply chain, and also that costs the brand to do that. So a huge amount in time and money as well on every product. Our own label is fair trade certified and GOT certified, and there's a huge amount of checks that go on behind the scenes. And I know a lot of people say oh, fair trade, there's a lot of issues, blah blah blah, but fair trade has been phenomenal in changing the conversation. It put it on the map. It did it before anybody else was doing it, and has transformed the lives of millions of people around the world. And I think in a lot of the communities, when you buy a fair trade product, there's a premium that is paid out to the people that have made that product for building roads, schools, whatever that community decides that they need. To be able to trade more freely and fairly. So I, where possible, tend to buy certified product.
The other thing, so this coffee from Cal's Coffee is Rainforest Alliance certified, but I can't put the Rainforest Alliance
to pay
certification on there because I have to pay a premium for that. So it's really difficult for us as a super, super small business, because we can't afford. We do buy fair trade certified coffee as well through importers like Olam, but we can't put it on our packaging because we don't have
the administrative costs.
Yeah.
Is huge. And I agree, Charlotte, with you. I think the fair trade movement, what's been around since the 80s now, has done untold good. I mean, the principle itself is brilliant. So certainly in coffee. Esther, you might know this one, but I think it's $1.20, might be $1.30 per pound is a fair trade minimum, plus a 20-cent premium. Whereas, like you said, at the moment, what's the price? 90 cents. So if you're on the fair trade, you should be getting, at least the minimum should be a sort of a living. In many cases, it's not. In many cases, it doesn't really work for small coffee cooperatives because they're never going to have the money to afford the certification. The auditing process costs money, but also the auditors typically say we're going to be there on Monday. So if there's leaving in the supply chain, guys, take Monday off. It's not a panacea. It is not perfection, but it's something.
I think it's the part is the beginning, isn't it? And then you build other things on top of that. External audits. There's a lot of other things you can do. But
so we do via Clifton, our coffee roasters, direct trade, which I think is the same thing as you. So direct trade in its very nature is trading directly with the farmer to try and cut out as many middlemen as possible and give them a fair price and build a premium into that as well. But there's no Gucci stamp we can put on the bag and say, by the way, because that's not recognised. And there's a reason for that. But another thing people can look out for is that word direct trade or relationship coffee. They're good things, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes. I want to ask you. I want to ask you a few more things about, just very, very briefly before we sort of close. And before we close, I've got a Christmas quiz for you.
Ooh.
About Q grading. So, are you doing this Q? Because I think I saw it on your social media.
Yeah. So
what is that? How does one become a Q grader?
So this is like.
This is
My life
proper
is-
coffee nerd stuff.
Yeah,
isn't
my
it?
life is a bit of a joke, really. I just kind of roll with the punches and just get on with stuff. And so,
What do you mean? What do you mean?
like, as I explain, you'll understand. But I'm very like all in or all out kind of person.
Yes.
So when we've done this coffee business, I have gone and tried to get as much information and knowledge about coffee as possible. So I'm trained as an AST, which is a certified trainer with the Specialty Coffee Association.
Cool.
And I've done all kinds of courses in like roasting coffee, brewing coffee, sensory skills, and barista skills. And I've got like qualifications to train in those as well.
So you've got a qualification for. So is it like based on your latte art? Like I've got a grade A latte art certificate on my wall.
So, yeah, kind of. Like it involves stuff like that and like extraction of coffee. And it's like really scientific, actually.
Yeah.
Like you can understand why people get so into it is because it's like you basically should wear a lab coat when you're doing these kind of stuff.
Spectacles.
But in terms of the Q grading, so I was actually having like a really, really busy week. It was in September. I'd just come back from a week off. Oh my gosh, a week off. Who knew that was possible? And it was my first week off of the year. And then the roastery is kind of chaos. And I had Bristol Coffee Festival at the end of the week. And I got a phone call from my friend Emma, who works at London School of Coffee, and she was like, Esther, someone's just dropped out of this Q grading course next week. Do you want the space? And I was like, because there's so much hype around the Q grading course. It's like that is the ultimate qualification that every coffee connoisseur wants.
Is there only like 200 Q graders in the UK? Or
Yeah,
less,
there's not
It's
many.
not a lot, yeah.
And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll find some way to do it. And people prepare for months for this course, and it's like really extensive. And I just kind of thought, I'll just go along, and there's no way I'm gonna pass. So I'll just go along, and I'll give it my best, and I'll just try and learn as much as I can. Like, and I took my notebook. I literally filled a whole notebook with notes about every single day. So you go to the course, it's a 6-day course, and you start off with just like a general introduction to like coffee processing and things. And the guy that did it, he was flown in from America, and he's called Rocky Roads, which I
His
think
name is Rocky
just
Roads.
hilarious. And his daughter is called Tulane Rhodes, and his son is called Dane Juris Rhodes.
Oh, what an
He
eccentric
is-
bunch.
He is hilarious. But anyway, so he's like this coffee god, and he's written so many books, and he was, so it was just a privilege to be taught by him, to be honest. And you go through everything, and you learn how to certify coffee, basically, to grade it. So there's a grading system in coffee where it's graded out of 100 based on things like flavour, the body of the coffee, the mouthfeel, that kind of thing,
I like that
or
one.
the sweetness, the uniformity. And the idea really is to give a universal language to talk about coffee. And so, because a lot of farmers have been for a long time had people coming to buy their coffee and say, your coffee is absolutely disgusting. We only want to pay pennies for it. And so these farmers have no way of like
So proving otherwise.
proving or having a scale to say, actually, no, our coffee tastes really good. There was no,
Yeah.
what's the right word for that?
Grading?
Like no grading system, no like points to reach. Benchmarks, that's the one. There was no
Nice, Charlotte.
benchmarks
You're
for
welcome.
Good catch.
like how they could sell their coffee or what it was worth. So in this So people would sell their coffee for super, super cheap, and then these importers would then make or these brokers would make so much money off the coffee because they would then come back to Europe and sell it as this high premium coffee that tastes amazing. And so there's actually stories of like coffee farmers going online and Googling their coffee and finding out that it's being sold as like this super luxury, like £15 for 250 grams.
Wow.
Whereas they were literally sold it to the broker for like pennies because they thought it was disgusting. And so it's kind of this grading system. They do it at origin as well. So they're teaching coffee farmers to be able to grade their own coffee as well so that they can have that empowerment and say, no, I know how much my coffee's worth. So, this course is like trying to get everyone on the same level and trying to get you accustomed to the grade system and understanding what makes a coffee good or what makes a coffee not so good. So training in defects and things like that. So, and at the end of it, there is 19 exams that you have to pass.
Oof.
And you have to pass every single exam to get this course. And some of them you can retake in the week and some of them you can't. And so on the first day, I was I knew I wasn't going to pass. So on the first day, I kind of went in and I thought, I'm just going to try and get as many under my belt as possible. And then I'll retake the others in January. And so so there's literally like a table that with just African coffees on it. And for each coffee, there's 5 cups of coffee and you slurp them all and you grade them all. And sometimes they throw defects in there that you've got to be able to recognise. And I was going around this table and I'm like, I can't taste any defects, but there must be a defect on here somewhere. Yeah. And I'm going round and I'm slurping all this coffee and I'm like, and I'm trying to read other people's faces. I was totally overthinking it. And I'm like, oh, people keep going back to that cup. That must have a defect in it. And I'm tasting it and I'm like, I can't taste any defect, but there must be one somewhere. So I just marked that cup because it was lower as defective and I like graded the coffee accordingly.
Based on other people's.
I totally didn't trust my gut or instinct and was just like panicking myself.
Yeah.
And then so I graded that coffee as like a defective coffee. And then Rocky Roads sat me down afterwards and he was like, Esther, we need to talk. And I was like, okay, I think I found a defect, but I don't actually think I did. He was like, you were hunting for unicorns. There wasn't anything wrong with the coffee. And I was like, oh no. And then he was like, I'm going to have to fail you on this one because you could have ruined a farmer's livelihood. Like, wow. If you'd have said that coffee was defective in a real life situation and it wasn't, wow. Like, you would have ruined that farmer wouldn't have been able to sell that crop that year, or he would have had to sell it really cheap. And he was like, so, I'm going, like, I hope you understand, I'm going to have to fail you on it. Yeah. And I was like, do you know what? Like, I totally deserved that. Like, if I was going to ruin a farmer's livelihood, like, I don't think I should have passed either. Yeah. But at the same time, it was frustrating because I knew there wasn't a defect. I was literally hunting round for one and nobody else found one. So I was like, oh, I should have just trusted my instinct. But then after that, you do all kinds of other exams. Like, you get a cup of like solutions and it's like salt, sweet and bitter, or no, salt, sweet and acidic all mixed together in a cup, and you have to detect how much salt is in the thing, how much sweetness, and whether there's any acidity on a scale of like 1 to 3, and it's all mixed in. And so you have to really be able to understand like your taste buds and things like that. And because I'd failed the very first exam, oh my gosh, it kind of took the pressure off of me. Yeah. So then I went through and I managed to pass the rest of them. So that was really, really good. Like,
well, you passed all of the other ones.
Yeah, well, apart from one other African triangulation, and then I'll have to retake them in January, and then hopefully I will not ruin a farmer's livelihood and I will get the qualification.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Yeah. Well
but
done.
honestly, I know this is like going to sound like an advertisement for Q grading now, but if anyone's listening and they're interested in coffee, that it is
Hopefully lots of people.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is such an overhyped like fear factor exam and process, and people are like, oh, I'm not good enough to do the Q grading. And I literally went in with no practice and no thing, and they teach you everything you need to know to take the exams in the course anyway. But also it's just so fascinating to find out about the processes of coffee in such an in-depth way, the way it's grown, how the different environmental factors affect the flavour of the coffee, and all these kind of things. Like, it is the coffee nerd's dream week.
Yeah.
I think also you're probably not giving yourself enough credit in the sense of like you've worked in this industry and sphere for like years, and it's been something like when I first met you like 5 or 6 years ago, like all you were talking about was how passionate you were about coffee. So I think you probably know a lot more than you think you know.
Agreed.
Because even back then you were like, I don't know, I was like, wow, that's a lot.
Maybe that's a bit of like imposter syndrome that I have. Where
Everyone
you think,
has that. Like even when you meet CEOs of like multi-billion pound, like they're still like, should I be here?
One day someone's going to find me out.
I spoke at the Forbes like chief marketing officers conference, and I was so nervous because I was like, why am I speaking here when like all these people like run huge organizations? And loads of people came afterwards, and I was like, they were like, oh, well done. They were like, oh, I'm so nervous. And they were just like, wow, we all have that like little person on our shoulder. Like no matter how old you are, what level of experience. He was like, I have like 10,000 employees and I still feel that way. And I was like, okay, great.
That's good to know, isn't it? It's really reassuring.
Christmas quiz time.
Okay, Christmas quiz.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions each. I've literally just looked up a Christmas quiz online whilst we've been sat here talking. So I'm going
Glad you're well prepared.
Thoroughly prepared. I'm going to pick these questions at random. The winner gets a bag of Blue Bear.
Oh,
coffee. Okay.
Charlotte, you're going down.
So
I actually am, because I hate Christmas.
What? You can't drop that in at the end of our Christmas special.
No, I love Christmas. I'm really bad at anything other than flag rounds on quizzes. But
What's
I'm gonna
a flag round?
You know, where you have to like say what the flag is from which country.
Where it's like on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I love that.
Recognise
Extremely
it.
niche. Well, that's
Well, that's the only round I can help with on a quiz. Anything else, I'm out.
Is that because
But I'm
you've
gonna
researched
have a go.
flags?
I used to have a poster on my wall growing up.
you memorised them.
Lame. But
Nice.
Charlotte,
anyway, back to the quiz.
question 1. What's the name of the period leading up to Christmas?
Festive time.
Ah, yes, the famous
Can we have like a
festive
bing?
time.
Bing!
What do you press for getting it wrong then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, please don't make that noise
Yeah.
at me. I'm going to leave feeling sad about myself.
I don't want that to be
I
the
knew like
case.
a weird niche about like ethical trade, but like
Yeah.
anything else, I'm
Or
like,
flags.
I'm out, boys.
Yeah, ethical trade or flags.
So
Yeah.
Or
that's-
Love Actually.
That's
Yeah.
it. Okay, so the answer is Advent, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Advent.
Do you have an advent calendar?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, I
do you?
need to.
Hopefully, otherwise my parents are going to be fired.
Esther, your question.
Yes.
How does good King Wenceslas like his pizzas?
Warm.
With pepperoni? Vegan?
Deep, pan, crisp, and even.
Deep. Oh, that's good.
Deep, pan, crisp,
That
and
wasn't good. Don't
even.
encourage him in this.
So that
Okay,
was.
sorry, I take it back. Awful.
That's nil.
I mean, I'm
nil.
sure he did like pepperoni on it as well.
I just want to get one.
Yeah,
Like, that's all
let
I
me try
want.
and find some reasonable question here. They're quite odd. Who brings presents to children in the Netherlands on the 5th and 6th of December? Charlotte. Okay, so don't overthink this.
There's another word for Father Christmas, isn't there? It's not. It's
There's lots of words for something.
I don't know. I'm not going to pretend I know.
Saint Nick.
Yeah! Ding,
That
ding,
was
ding,
a
ding,
total
ding, 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 ding.
guess.
So I didn't actually ask you that question, but you stole a point. I'm going to
Sorry.
give you a I'm going to give you a stolen point for
Classic
that.
Esther.
I know.
Bullying people.
I am very good at
Okay.
intimidating people.
I'm going to
I
give
literally
you.
just came here for Bluebird coffee, so I'm going to be so sad if I don't get some.
In what decade? This is a chance for you to even up. Well, at least it's a difficult one, I think, for you,
Okay.
Esther. In what decade was the first Christmas card sent in the UK?
1920.
No, much before that. 1840.
Oh.
Of course. Okay, so it's still 1-0. We're pulling in, so you could
I
draw.
wonder who came up with that. Who was like, do you know what? I'm going to write a letter or bid good wishes to my friend this Christmas time and then post it.
And I'm
someone
sure
thought-
they probably did it before, but on,
Yeah.
other forms of media.
Yeah.
What, like slates?
Rocks and slates.
Yeah.
Charlotte, simple one. What?
Don't say that and then ask a question, because it might not be.
point.
You're reading the answer, so of course it's simple.
All right, then maybe it's not. Let's just see how you find this one.
I'm ready.
What angel visited Mary?
I should know this.
Come on!
Gabriel.
Yay! 1-1.
1-1.
Esther,
Okay.
can you finish it with this? Shall I pick a simple one or a tough one? What do you
A
think,
really
Charlotte?
hard one.
Yeah, go
Because-
hard. Go hard or go home.
You. Okay.
Preferably one that doesn't have an answer.
They all now
so she
seem
can't
really
win.
quite simple, but you never know. Once again, I'm informing the question before I ask it. Where do Christmas trees come from? Where do they originate?
The ground.
You know you can steal an answer.
Seed. They grow out of a seed.
No, but what country?
Germinate.
I'm literally only smiling because I'm happy she doesn't know, not because I know myself.
Finland. Iceland.
Norway.
Germany.
Oh! So I have to take your first
Listing
answer.
European countries.
Yeah. Which was Finland, and that's a. So you won all, which means you both get a bag of coffee.
Okay, that is.
Love that fairness.
Yeah.
I've got one
That is
here
fair.
from. I'm going to give.
What is it? You have to describe it.
I've got a bag. We've started selling some new coffees just this week.
Oh
so
yeah,
we've
I've
got-
seen online. That's exciting.
Two
There's a
each is-
Panama one, right?
Do you want that one? Do you want the Panama one? I've got it here, and here's one from Ethiopia. Both amazing. I would
Nice.
talk in further detail if it wasn't for the fact we're running out of time. I want to close on a high as ever. Charlotte, what gives you hope for the future of the things we've been discussing today? Ethical goods, fashion, conscientious consumerism.
That was a big pause. A lot of things give me hope. I think just seeing the amount of people talking about it. I remember so this is like a really silly little thing, but when I was doing my dissertation, I had to literally fight my lecturer to let me do it on anything ethical. And I was probably the only one in my class that was doing something sustainable. And now we literally receive hundreds of people being like, can you answer this dissertation thing? And even at LCF, they say half the class is doing it on a topic on sustainability. So I think people that are coming through now do care more, and I think it is so exciting to see that passion translate. And the amount of brands that are starting and the conversation on the high street with people starting to do eco collections and celebrities talking about it more, I think it is going in the right direction. So I feel really positive about it.
Esther, what gives you hope?
I guess in terms of modern slavery, just the fact that so many more people are now aware that it's going on and that people are talking about it. One of the big parts of our brand is not only just helping survivors of slavery, but raising awareness about it, which is I'm sure with Blue Bear as well. And the amount of people we've been able to come into contact with and tell them, they ask, oh yeah, but that's only happening abroad. And I'm like, no, here in Cardiff, there is slavery going on. And people are like, oh, well, actually, I did see something suspicious the other day. And helping people to understand and be aware that it's going on. And hopefully that will then translate into ending slavery in some form, or contributing to that. So I think that's really good. And then in terms of coffee, I think most coffee brands now have got so much pressure on them to find out about who is growing their coffee.
Yeah.
And it's becoming such a normal part of coffee to talk about cost of production,
Yeah.
at least maybe in the sphere that I'm in, and hopefully that will extend then into commercial coffee and
Yeah.
global domination.
Global domination! What better place to end it? Merry Christmas to you both.
Yes, and you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I am huge fans of you both, and you know that. I wish you all the very best for the new year and bigger and better, greater things.
Yes.
Ethical global domination.
Ethical global domination.
Thank you.
So there you have it, our Christmas podcast special. They were great, weren't they? I think that hearing how Esther and Charlotte have used their lives, their creative entrepreneurial verve, to make their businesses as honest, transparent and purposeful as possible is really encouraging, isn't it? I realise that buying fair trade products or ethical products is a luxury that some of us just can't afford. I get that, but the more of us that can afford to, we really should be trying to buy right. And doing so is only going to leverage more pressure on big business to make sustainable and ethical sourcing the new norm. We have the power. Maybe you can exercise some of that purchasing power this Christmas. I realise that was a long podcast, so I'm going to expedite the closing of this episode. I just want to thank Charlotte and Esther for coming to see us on the podcast. I want to thank Soho Radio for their ongoing support. This week, can I thank Heather, Chloe and Tara, who all gave generously to our Kickstarter fundraiser campaign to put on this podcast. Thank you, ladies. I'm very grateful. This podcast was produced by Blue Bear Coffee Co. If you want to find out more about us, head to our website at bluebearcoffee.com. If you want to find out more about our guests, you can head to manumitcoffee.co.uk or knowtheorigin.com. Leaves me nothing more than to wish you the very warmest of winters, the very merriest of Christmases, and the happiest of New Years. Hopefully I'll see you in the new year. We're going to take a break over Christmas. The next episode will be coming out the second half of January. So until then, all the best.